Hey, mamas. Welcome to the show. All right, so today I want to talk about how to prepare your children for college before they even start school. Um, if you didn't know, I have been a college professor for the last 12 years, and I see the same issues popping up over and over again in college students who are not successful. And a lot of these skills are skills that we should start teaching our little kids so that when they get into middle school and high school and college and there's more and more freedom, that they do things well, right? And they are successful. So I want to talk about three things today. I'm going to talk about routine and planning. I'm going to talk about independence, and I'm going to talk about decision making. These three things are really going to help your kids succeed as they increase their independence as they go through the levels of school, and especially when they reach college. Because what happens for a lot of kids is that they reach college, they've never had to put their own routines in place, they've never had to do their own planning, they haven't had the independence, and they don't know how to make decisions. And so when they get to college, there's all of this overwhelm, and then they shut down. Okay. And so if you do not put these, give kids the opportunity to practice these skills while they're young. And I even do this, Eric just turned 3. Okay. We're working on this stuff with Eric all the time. And so let's talk about these and how they can look in your home with your kids so that your kids will be successful. Okay, so the first one is routine and planning. So I think routine is incredibly important in very, very young children because it gives them predictability. It helps them feel more secure because, when things are predictable and they know what's going to happen, it makes their lives a lot easier for them. And like I said, it brings a sense of security that especially little kids need in order to thrive. Okay, so your routine does not have to be exactly the same every single day, but I think what is helpful, and I was taking a course with Simone Davies, who wrote The Montessori Toddler, which is a fantastic book if you've got a little kid and you're interested in Montessori. We'll drop the link in the show notes at smallbizmama.com. But I think, she said that it's not having like a timetable, but it's more having a rhythm to your day. And so that means that, your child wakes up. What's the first thing we do every day? Right? Then what's the next thing that we do? And so it's not based on like following the clock, but it's based off of creating routines so that this is the next thing we do, and this is the next thing we do, and this is the next thing we do. And so like in our house, one of the routines that we have is that we have lunch, and then we have mama time, and mama time is stories and cuddles and, talking about the morning and what we did. And then Eric has rest time. And then after rest time, we have more mama time. Right. And so the afternoons are usually like a project. We'll do some art, something that's really fun to help ease us into independent play so that, I can make dinner. Okay. So notice that that's not so much a time thing, right? But it's a rhythm, it's a flow to our day and what our day is going to look like. And the reason that that's important is when kids get to college, the routine looks a lot different, okay, than it does in high school. So, think about this for a second. So you go from having, 7 hours, or 8 hours a day in class, Monday through Friday, to moving to a situation where you might only have class 2 days a week, or maybe you're only in class a couple hours a day, 5 days a week, or 4 days a week. The difference between high school and college, the thing that colleges don't do a really good job with is they don't do a good job explaining what is expected of students when they come in. So most students are going to spend about 2.5 hours a week inside of class for each one of the classes that they take. However, we expect that college students are going to spend usually 2 to 3 hours outside of class for every hour they put in. Okay, so if the student is in class for 2.5 hours, that means that they should be spending about 7.5 hours outside of class reading, working on projects, doing research, homework, studying for exams, doing all of the things that are expected. Professors don't explain that. They just don't. And so students go into class for 2.5 hours a week. They think that that's going to be enough time. They cram for their exams. They fail, and they can't figure out why it's not working. The other thing I find that students do is they put way too much on their plate when they first start school. I've had students that are taking 6 classes, they're volunteering, they have a job where they're working like 30 hours a week, and they can't figure out like why they can't keep up with everything. Well, if you're taking 6 classes at 10 hours a week, right, the 2.5 in class plus the 7.5 out of class, that's 60 hours a week of work, right, just to keep up with your classes. And then if you're working another 30 hours a week, that's 90, right, plus all the other things that you're doing as a college student. That's crazy, right? This is why kids are drowning in college. And as parents, we kind of need to sit there alongside them and say, listen, you can't take that 6th class, okay? Or you can't work 30 hours a week. There's got to be some support there from us. And it's not, I don't want you to helicopter, because that doesn't help either, right? And we'll talk about independence in a second, but kind of show them how to do planning. They make planners for middle school and high school kids. Have your child plan out what their schedule is going to look like. Even with Eric, we have this little magnetic board. Now, Eric's only 3. We have this little magnetic board, and it kind of shows like, okay, this is what our routine looks like, right? Here's the next thing you want to do, or we need to do. And if we want to change things around, we can give him choices, right? So I think that this is really, really important, that we've got to teach our kids how to do this. And it's funny because in bookkeeper training school, one of the first things I have our bookkeepers do is I have them do an exercise where they have to allocate their 168 hours every week. And we did a podcast episode about this a few episodes ago, so you can go check that out too, where I kind of walk you through how to do this. It amazes me how many people are like, okay, so I put in all my responsibilities and I'm at 200 hours a week. And I'm like, well, that's great, but you only have 168. So how are we going to make that work for you? What are you going to take off your plate? And I did this. It's funny because I did this with college students, the same exact exercise. I did it with them. And a lot of them said, oh my God, I had so much time unallocated that now I have to go figure out like what I do in that time. And I had kids come back to me as seniors and tell me that they use this all along their journey through college. And so it was really cool. It was really cool to see that, to see that process. So yeah, I thought that was awesome. Okay. So the first one is planning and routines. Okay. The second one is independence. And I get this as a toddler, but I guess I'm a preschool mom now. Oh, I'm not ready for that. Okay. I'm so not ready for that. But as a mom of a little, it is really hard to make that transition between doing everything for them and giving them some freedom and independence. Eric is now at the point that he wants to do everything himself, no matter what. And so we put structures in place so that he has a lot of independence, that he can get the peanut butter out of the cabinet. He can get himself a plastic knife. He can reach the bread and he'll make himself a little sandwich. And it's pretty cool to see that. Now mind you, we're in the room, right? So that if he does need help, but we try to stand back and let him have some freedom to do it on his own. Okay. So I just think that that's incredibly important. Give your kids the independence. And I know a lot of you are not going to agree with this. One of the greatest things that I did in high school was I had a job through most of high school. It allowed me to make some money. So I had to manage that money. I had to manage my schedule. Um, I had to learn about people and customer service. Um, it was really good for me. And I'll tell you, working with hiring managers and hiring agents, it's it's really hard when your kid has not had any work experience to try to get them a job. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Um, and so, when your kids are little, have them do chores around the house. And then as they get older, give them more responsibility, give them more independence. And then, when they get old enough, have them get a job, even if it's just a summer job. But I mean, honestly, what I learned about it's funny because routine and planning and scheduling by having a job um, was just it was just so beneficial. And I know a lot of people they want their kids to focus on school, um, but I'll tell you they will they will probably do a little bit better in school having a job because they will see the importance. And one thing it was funny because I was one of those kids that did well in high school, even though I didn't really do any work. I was kind of lazy in high school, um, but I was really book smart, and so I could kind of skate my way through. And having a job really helped me to kind of see like, okay, I need to gain more skills. I need to get better grades so that way, I can move out of working, my crappy high school job. And so that kind of helped me focus a little bit more in school than I did before I had a job. Okay. And think about other ways you can kind of foster independence. Can your kids make dinner? Oh, forgot. I cannot even tell you how many kids come in to university not knowing anything about cooking. They don't know how to do laundry. Um, they just like basic survival skills. Um, it was funny. So I had a student who came from New Jersey, and in New Jersey, you don't pump your own gas. I know my listeners are from New Jersey. You know this. You can't pump your own gas. So when he came to school in New England, he's like, I don't know how to pump gas. And like he would bring his friends with him when he went to get gas so that they get gas for him. And I'm like, why don't you just have them teach you? He's like, oh, I can't pump gas. I mean, honestly, like this is some of the stuff that we're dealing with in colleges. Folks, we need to make sure that our kids have the life skills that they need. I have a lot of college students that show up that don't know how to manage money at all, right? And so that's something because their parents just kind of handed them whatever money they needed when they went out. And I'm telling you, I don't think that we really understand the disservice that we're doing to our kids when we don't give them the independence that they need. I know we're trying to protect them. We're trying to make sure that they're taken care of, but the best thing that we can do is help them take care of themselves. And so I kind of want you to think about, what the critical skills that your kids are going to need. Make sure they know, and I know this sounds really silly, but make sure they know how to vacuum properly. Make sure they know how to clean a floor properly. Make sure they know what cleaners to use when and what things not to mix together. Okay. Make sure they understand how to use basic tools. I know we take this stuff for granted that like our kids are going to know this stuff and they don't. And so independence is critically important, if they're going to survive in school. And I think it also builds up confidence so that when they do they hit conflict, they don't just shut down. I have a lot of students that they fail an assignment in one of my classes and it's like, it's doom and gloom and the whole world is just going to like crash around them. And it's like, you realize that this assignment is like 5% of your grade. Like, it's like, really, um, I sometimes think that the math skills are also not so good, but that's a totally different episode. So, all right. So first one's routine and planning. The second one's independence. The third one's decision making. Um, and I think that this kind of goes with the other two, but I think it's critically important that we teach our kids how to make good decisions. Um, going back to what I just said about math, right? So I've had students not get their final finished because they were doing a homework assignment that was worth 2% of their grade. And it's like, okay, we have to assess what's important and do the correct assignment. And you would think that this is like a one-off thing, but this happens quite frequently, actually, where students are making decisions that are not in their best interest, that are not in the best interest of their grade. And it's, and I think part of it's a math thing, and part of it is just having never had to make decisions and set priorities before. And so, we do little things with Eric, like, okay, Eric, here's 2 shirts. Which one do you want to wear? Okay. Or, do you want to play outside or do you want to play inside? Just little decisions right now that he gets to make so that he has some control. Okay. And I think that that's important. Get your kids involved in, in the meal planning, in family vacation planning, in, if they have choice of where they get to go to school when they're a little bit older. Think about how you can get your kids involved in just routine decision making, because the more decisions they make, again, this is kind of this, this analysis paralysis thing, where kids get to college and there are so many little decisions that they have to make. I was actually reading in a book. I couldn't believe this. I was reading in a book last night. The average person makes 35,000 decisions a day. That's like a day. That's why we have decision fatigue by the end of the night. But so if you're not allowing your kids to make, some higher level, some impactful decisions, when they get to college and they have to make good choices, they're not going to do it. It's funny, my students laugh at me because my sign off on the last day of the week, which was typically like a Thursday, as they're all filing out of the classroom, I would say, don't do anything that's going to show up on Facebook and keep you from getting a job. And it was funny because I had students come up to me and say, I just want to let you know that my friends were trying to get me to do something, and I heard your voice say, have a good weekend. Don't do anything that's not, that's going to show up on Facebook and keep you from getting a job. And I made a good decision. I'm like, yay. It's those little things that like make your life as a professor, right? That you're making an impact. So, give your kids a chance to make decisions while it's easy, and while they're not going to, do something that is going to impact the rest of their lives. And I know it sounds really silly, but when you look at some of these kids and what they're posting on Facebook, or what they think is okay to put on their cars, or with their email addresses, and you're like, oh, good God. Decision making does not seem high on the skills list, and that's something we really need to work on with our kids. So, I think these 3 things, when put together, right? When I look at the kids that, and again, I've been doing this for 12 years, when I look at the kids that are really successful in college, they are really good at these things. They're really good at planning and putting together their routines. I'm telling you, the students that are really good in college, that aren't stressed out, they have an entire routine, and it stays like week to week. They have a routine, and it doesn't change a whole lot. And it's funny because a lot of the kids I find that are like that are really, really solid kids, and I know this kind of like, bucks what a lot of people think. I've had some really good student athletes come through my classroom. And it's the real elite ones. So it's the ones that, I've had students go play pro baseball. I've had students go play hockey. I've had students go play soccer. And the thing that they're very disciplined in their routines, including how they've scheduled out their classes. And that's not all of them. I've had some that had really terrible routines and, were late to practice all the time. And so it's not like just an athlete thing, but I've kind of found that there are some that have gone through programs that were very routine driven, who did really, really well in school. So routines and planning, independence, solid decision making. Start with your kids really, really young, and you'll be setting them up for success for the rest of their lives. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you will work on these things with your children. And please, if you like this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps other people find the show, and it helps us broaden our audience. All right, mamas, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Small Biz Mama with Kristen Ingram. If you'd like to learn how to create more margin in your life, please visit us at smallbizmama.com. That's smallbizmama.com.